Cyberpunk 2077 modding has been booming as of late. With patch 1.6, of course, we saw the release of the official mod tools, that with Red Mod. And it seems like this really stirred a whole additional wave of interest in modding Cyberpunk, and as a result, we've been getting a ton of new releases, definitely more new content for this game than we've seen in a long time. And of course, there's a whole new wave of new interest with the release of Edgerunners. So in this video, I'm going to show you some of the absolute best new mods you could download for Cyberpunk 2077. Let There Be Flight is easily one of the biggest and coolest mods to drop recently for Cyberpunk. What this will do is add in the ability for cars to fly in Cyberpunk. With the tap of a button, thrusters will appear on your car or motorcycle, and they're definitely hilariously large on motorcycles, but from there you're able to fly up and away out of Night City. This is an absolutely incredible mod. It might look familiar to some of you because it was actually in beta earlier this year, only just recently after patch 1.6 did it get a full and proper release, and the experience here is actually pretty simple. When you're driving just about any vehicle in Cyberpunk 2077, you can simply tap the E key and it'll transition you into the flying mode for that vehicle. Your on-screen HUD will change a bit, you'll get some cool new thruster sounds and even a variety of new controls. And the incredibly fun part about this mod is you can switch in and out of flying on a whim. So you can use this quite tactfully, whether it be to get away from a bunch of enemies that are attacking you, to simply skip over traffic or increase your speed dramatically, or even just plummet back down to Night City as you're mid-air and then land on a road and continue driving. But why Let There Be Flight is so awesome is you would just kind of assume that a flying mod or making flying vehicles in a video game that doesn't have them by default would be pretty janky, but Let There Be Flight has an insane amount of polish. The flying feels right. There are a variety of different modes you could choose from with each of the vehicles, so you could have things like the typical flying mode where you're able to stay pretty close to the ground or fly up higher if you want to, easy to control, or alternatively a hover mode where you are just hovering above the ground, staying pretty low. There's a drone mode where you can do all kinds of crazy acrobatics. I highly recommend using a controller with this one, and in reality, I'm sure as many of you attempt the drone mode, you'll probably just spin uncontrollably and crash somewhere because it is very hard to control at first. But overall, flying becomes a very practical and usable aspect of Cyberpunk. It's not just a gimmick, this is something that actually makes sense across a playthrough, and there's even things like it tracking the health of your vehicle. If your vehicle health gets too low, the car will actually play a warning sound that it's about to explode and you're able to eject from it. Overall, a truly incredible mod and one that is way better than it has any right being. Another vehicle mod that I actually consider a must download as of now is Bike Overhaul. In Cyberpunk 2077 by default, I truly feel like the motorcycles are just kind of slightly different cars. There isn't nearly enough distinction there, and the typical strengths of motorcycles in the real world just don't really extend to the in-game world. Well, as you can probably imagine, Bike Overhaul will fix that. It'll rework the stats for the motorcycles you can unlock in Night City, and it'll make these feel truly unique and distinctive compared to what else is out there. Right off the bat, bikes in Cyberpunk will now have a higher top speed and a much higher acceleration. This puts them in a league of their own above most of the other cars in the game. And even handling gets a complete overhaul here. Bikes are going to be far more maneuverable and nimble, and this will be reflected visually. V will definitely lean more with this mod, and even things like the turning radii are much smaller with bikes now. Each of the bikes will actually get slightly different changes, so the various motorcycles you do have will have a bit of their own identity, some of them being faster, having a higher top speed, while others are a bit more maneuverable. As well as this mod will contain a variety of other miscellaneous changes, like separating rear and front braking, and even changes to the gearing on most of the motorcycles. Overall, to me, it's a really phenomenal mod that really changes up how you can experience motorcycles in Cyberpunk, with the most important part being that it really makes it feel like they have pros and cons and are distinctive to other cars in the game. In Cyberpunk by default, when you attack an enemy from afar with a silencer and you don't take them out in one shot, they'll immediately know your location and alert the other enemies around them to attack you, which does kind of make silencers just feel bad. What's the point of using a silencer if the enemy immediately knows where you are if you don't one-shot them? Well, silent silencers and throwing knives will change that. Now, when attacking enemies from afar with a silencer attached, they will merely go into an alert state and begin looking for you. This making it so you can use silencers to pick off entire groups of enemies as long as you don't get too close to them or they don't notice you more explicitly. And not getting too close to them is actually a part of this mod. There's a setting where you can determine a certain distance where your silencer will no longer be effective, and if if you attack an enemy in that distance, they will immediately notice you and attack you, just like the vanilla behavior. And of course, this will also extend to throwing knives. And one of the cool features is you can independently configure the detection distance of each of these. So you can make it so you have to be fairly far away to effectively use silencers, but you can be very close and still remain in stealth with a throwing knife. Because, you know, whipping a knife through the air is relatively quiet. I don't think that makes much sound at all, although I admittedly have never tested that. But of course, let's not kid ourselves. The vast majority of you are watching this video because you just watched Cyberpunk Edgerunners and now you're infatuated with Cyberpunk 2077, which is definitely a good thing. But modders are also infatuated with Edgerunners, and as a result, we've gotten a variety of new Edgerunners mods for the game. You'll now be able to get both the Lucy Edgerunners jacket and Lucy Edgerunners suit in-game. These are technically two completely separate clothing pieces that are added, and these are completely custom made and modeled for Cyberpunk based off the anime. Each of these is going to have 4 different variants that will have slightly different visuals, and although it's not the complete Lucy outfit, it is pretty nice to have these as standalone options if you want to customize your character a bit further, or even use these 2 pieces with other things in the game. And it's nice that this is a completely new item in Cyberpunk 2077. For a long time, many of these outfit mods were actually replacing other pieces of clothing, but this one doesn't. It may not seem like the biggest deal to some of you, but it's definitely a pretty big milestone that we're at the point in Cyberpunk mods where you could add in completely new items without having to replace anything. Although be warned that both of these are female only, at least for right now, as you could probably imagine. But perhaps even a bit more useful is Edgerunners Radio. This will add in a completely new radio station that you could use in any vehicle, and it will basically just play the tracks from the Edgerunners anime. This will contain 13 tracks in total, and I'm not going to actually play them because copyright. And overall, just a really handy mod. Many of these tracks sound absolutely incredible. It's nice to have a bit more diversity in the in-game radio, which already has a ton of great choices. Then we do have Edgerunners Locations Additions. This mod is awesome if you actually did watch the anime. It's going to make some small edits to a variety of the locations around Night City that also appeared in Edgerunners to make them more accurate to how they appeared in the anime. So doing some simple things like changing the lighting for David's Ripper Dock or adding in some misc props around some of the other notable locations to basically be identical to how they appeared in the anime. It's a relatively minor mod overall, but one of those things that just feels cool. But speaking of things that are cool, we also do have Junk in the Trunk. This is going to be a pretty handy mod that will allow you to edit your outfits and use the entire new wardrobe feature just from your vehicle's trunk. Or I guess in this case, my vehicle's front. Typically, you can only actually create new outfits by returning to your apartment, and of course, this is going to make it so you could do that more properly on the go, just by going to one of your vehicles. It definitely makes this more functional overall. I understand why CDPR restricted it to apartments originally, and although there are some mods that will unlock being able to edit outfits anywhere, I feel like this is a nice hybrid. In a somewhat similar vein, we also do have scrap your items to obtain crafting recipes. This is going to add in that familiar RPG mechanic where, to learn how to craft an item, all you need to do is scrap it. And in Cyberpunk, this is actually going to apply to nearly all of the items in the game outside of iconic ones. The obvious example is being things like weapons or clothing. If you want to craft some of the new weapons added in with the recent update, now you just scrap them and you'll unlock their crafting recipes immediately. But it extends to a whole range of other things like grenades, some of the different mods you can get, or even medical items. And the way it works is once you disassemble an item, you'll unlock that rarity of it as a crafting recipe. So for example, I disassemble a Max Stock Mark III, and then I could craft Max Stock Mark IIIs, even though I could already do Mark 1s and 2s and unlock the 3 version for me. This of course is definitely getting a bit more into the cheaty side. It's going to make it easier to unlock crafting recipes overall. Typically you're going to have to do this via search and just kind of playing the game naturally and hoping you stumble upon things. But many of us have played Cyberpunk numerous times and we just don't want to deal with that. We want to get Armadillo and Crunch early game and have some of our favorite outfits right off the bat. A great tandem mod to this is going to be instant crafting and disassembling, which will make it so things will be created or deleted with one simple tap. Typically in game, many things will require a press and hold to make them, which can get incredibly tedious. This will make it instant and make it so you could burn through or craft many things all at once. There have been several mods to add in this functionality. Many were actually outdated at this point, so this is one of the newer things that does work on patch 1.6. Simple Untracked Quest is also a mod that there's other renditions of, but this is one of the most convenient and simple. It'll make it so you're able to untrack any quest simply by right-clicking it in-game. If you're at the end game, you have probably seen this quest for a lot of hours of your playtime, but now to stop staring at this quest, all you're going to have to do is either open up your journal and right-click it, or even just go onto the map and right-click it, and it will untrack that so you can have this clear beauty. It's really simple. I think this actually has a bit simpler functionality than some of the other mods out there, but I like that. I don't think that's a bad thing. There's no hotkeys required. This one just works out of the box, and of course, you can simply retrack that quest whenever you want to. But does it ever bother you that in Cyberpunk 2077, so many other people in Night City have these awesome cyber arms equipped, but V could never really achieve anything quite like that? Well, Cyber Arms Collection is going to implement that feature, at least for the female characters out there. Now you'll be able to jump on your computer in V's apartment and preview and purchase a whole array of different cyber arm options. There'll be all kinds of different styles here. Functionally, they're all pretty much exactly the same. This is just going to be a visual change to your character, but you do have a nice range of different appearances you can choose with these. And the way it'll work is after you pick one that you do like, you could preview it on your character and then purchase it, and then you simply equip it as an outfit, and some of your other clothes will layer atop of it. As I mentioned earlier, as of right now, this only works for female characters, but still a really handy implementation, even with that limitation, and it can make for some pretty nice pictures or just an overall change up to how your character looks. Although one mod that is an actual replacer is the Grimlock Customs FN57. This is a pretty interesting mod, and actually one of the first weapon mods I have ever covered for Cyberpunk. It's going to add in two new weapons. It'll replace the Unity pistol with the FN57. The 57, of course, being a real-world item that you can get. Some of you may actually have this, and now this mod will simply add it into Cyberpunk 2077. And it honestly looks and feels oddly at home here. It kind of matches up with some of the other pistol styles you could find in Cyberpunk, but this also does add in its own Cyberpunk real-world crossover version, as the Liberty weapon will be replaced with the Grimlock Customs FN57. This kind of being a crossover between a real-world 5.7 and the visuals of the Liberty pistol in-game. Overall, it's a pretty simple mod. Obviously, it's a bit unfortunate that it is a replacer, but if you've played enough of Cyberpunk, you're probably bored of some of the vanilla weapons anyway. And for me, it is just cool to start seeing some weapon mods and even some custom weapon mods getting added to the game. We've had a lot of melee options out there already, but not many ranged ones, and I feel like this is one of the better choices that has come out recently. But if you want to make Night City a bit prettier, we also do have Water 2077. By default, Night City's water is green, murky, and just very clearly polluted. Water 2077 will clean things up, making the water in Night City more notably blue and also just look genuinely swimmable. So now, is this lore friendly? No, absolutely not. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter because you're downloading a mod for a video game, and I think overall the bluer water does have a better look with Night City, especially if you're taking landscape screenshots or just overall scanning or flying around the city. But then we also do have auto loot for those of you sick of actually playing the game. What it'll do is make it so you can hit a hotkey and loot all of the corpses around you. You're able to set how wide this radius is, so if you don't want it to be too overpowered or too buggy. And I feel like this is one of those mods where for some of you you're going to be like, absolutely, I need this in my game. For some others, you're like, why would you do, doesn't it defeat the purpose of the game? Some people don't like running up to each body to loot them and either just ignore it or don't bother. Some other people enjoy that. They think that's a quintessential part of the game. And well, this mod will kind of take that away if you don't want to deal with it the vast majority of the time. Either way though, those are 15 relatively new mods for Cyberpunk 2077 that will upgrade or enhance certain aspects of the game and even adding some new features. I have a lot more Cyberpunk content coming. If you guys do want to get subscribed, there should be several new videos this week looking at other mods, looking at some secrets for the game, and even some hidden features that you probably don't know about. Cyberpunk mods are only going to continue to grow and get better and better. And at the current rate, we've been getting an absolute flood of new mod content, including a ton of updates for our older mods that I'll also be highlighting. So definitely stay tuned for what is next. But with that said, as always, again, I thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.